Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 14 of Justin and the Food Entrepreneurs Podcast. I'm Justin Bizzarro. I'm your host, and today I have with me my co-host, my business partner, and beautiful significant other, Deborah Michas.
Hello.
And today we'll be interviewing Lou Thomann of the Yaupon Wellness Co. And Lou, would you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your company?
Yes. First of all, thanks for having me. And Justin, thanks for all your support over the last couple of years in social media, the likes, the Instagram likes, etc. I appreciate all that. It's a wonderful feeling to be liked. So my name is Lou Thomann. I'm based out of Savannah, Georgia, and I'm the founder of a company called Yaupon Wellness Co. And although there's no specific pronunciation, we say Yaupon, but Yaupon is a very common pronunciation that we get from people. So we like Yaupon, but it's neither right or wrong. Our company is, I guess we'd like to be known as the Yaupon experts. Yaupon is an indigenous tree that grows in the southeastern part of the United States, mostly along the coastal areas in beautiful maritime forests. And Yaupon is being called by many of the herbalists now in this country the undiscovered or forgotten American medicinal plant. And our mission is to bring Yaupon back to the modern consumer while we research its wonderful traditional medicinal value. And so we're pioneering it as a consumer product in the traditional medicinal field or area of products or wellness products.
Lou, will you educate the audience a little bit about the medicinal benefits? I mean, I was fascinated when I did a little bit of research by how great it is for you.
Yeah, it's really an interesting plant. So it's in the holly family. It's in the ilex family. So to start with, there are two South American cousin plants, Yerba mate, which is pretty popular in the States right now and the world at large, and guayusa, both also out of South America. Yaupon is in the same family of hollies. We kind of call it the holly Trinity of ancient, sacred, traditional medicinal plants. In the Yaupon, we are finding that Yaupon is a very complex plant. It is very high in antioxidants, those sort of detoxing polyphenols and flavonoids that help detox the body and get rid of those free radicals. It also has, number one, it's also the only native source of caffeine in North America. So it's full of chlorogenic acids.
Yeah, I found that fascinating. I didn't realize that there was no other native caffeine source.
Yeah, Southerners always knew where to get their caffeine during times of economic strife or war. They went into the woods and got it. In fact, that may be one of the reasons it was sort of bypassed. It may have been considered a poor man's source of caffeine or tea. But yeah, so it also is rich in saponins, which is a really interesting complex of compounds that could help with blood sugar regulation, could be an anti-diabetic. There are also some white papers out of the University of Florida, for example, where in vitro the saponins in Yaupon protected colon cells from carcinogens. So it's really in the very, very early stage of research in terms of the medicinal values. But we do have a pretty good, catalog of the Native American use as a traditional medicinal, and that's a good starting point.
And so how is it that you guys came about bringing your teas about, and it sounds like you have other things in the works in terms of utilizing this plant and possibly other ones?
Yeah, well, the story of how I learned about Yaupon is a big part of our story, and we're a family business. My wife is very involved in the business as well. She's a successful real estate broker. She has her own company in Savannah called Judge Realty. But she is a healer of sorts, and she's been getting more and more into the medicinal value of herbs, including Yaupon, and she's a big part of it. But to go back to the beginning, we had a family nature walk on Ossabaw Island, which is a barrier island off of the Georgia coast, off of Savannah. And Ossabaw literally means land where the Yaupon grows in the original native tongue from that area. And Ossabaw is a beautiful barrier island, about 30,000 acres. And we were accompanied by a naturalist who is really one of the premier experts on coastal ecology, a guy by the name of John Crawfish Crawford. And we were walking through the woods on our family nature walk, and John said, "This is the Yaupon tree." It was called the beloved tree by the native tribes in the southeast, and they used it as a stimulating drink called the black drink. They used it medicinally as salves. They used it spiritually in ceremonies, and I was really intrigued. And when I was a young kid, I think like a lot of people, there are certain passions and interests you have when you're young, but as you grow older, things get in the way, whether it's, going to high school, going to college, job, right, marriage, kids. And that just really ignited that old passion. When I was a young kid, junior high, I used to read some of the native stories that were passed down, verbal stories, and I might say some of them were pretty wild. And it was just a passion I had about ancient cultures, but particularly Native American culture and traditions. But it was dormant, and when I was looking at this tree, and it just kind of ignited that old feeling and old interest, and he, Crawfish told us about the drink, and I said, well, let's make some. So we did. We picked some leaves, and we roasted them at the fire that night, and at the campfire we had some. And the taste was amazing, and it really made me feel well. There was a little bourbon involved too, but I did notice the effects. I did notice the effects of the Yaupon. It really, really struck me. So when I got back to the mainland, I went into research mode, and I love research. And as I researched this plant and whatever available information I could find, I realized this is an American treasure. This is a big, big story. This is an amazing story, and it goes back to the Native Americans trading it to the Mayans for cacao, because that another sacred plant like Yaupon has theobromine in it, which is an alkaloid you find in dark chocolate, cacao. And for example, I found articles saying how in the Cahokia Mounds in southern Illinois, they found earthenware with Yaupon as well as cacao residue. And in the Mayan areas in the Yucatan, they also found Yaupon and cacao in vessels that were being used to consume drinks. And so the history goes way, way back, and the use as a traditional medicinal goes way back. And that was a really fascinating revelation about Yaupon and the ethnobotany going that far back. But there was also a very strong early colonial American experience in ethnobotany in the story. All the different groups, like the English had a name for it, the Spanish called it Indian chocolate because there are natural sugars, and it has a sweet note if you brew it just right. And the French called it Appalachian because the Apalachicola Indians taught them about it. So there was also a strong early American experience with Yaupon that just added to the ethnobotany fascination to me.
So while on vacation with your family, you learn of this plant, and how do you, from that point, decide to turn this into a whole company and teas and bottled teas? How does that happen? Well, I was just, again, reigniting that old interest, that old passion for it. I started picking it. I started making teas. I started going to different charity events and serving it. I was giving it out to anybody who would drink it, and I started acting as an ambassador for the tree, talking about it. And people were fascinated, and without exception,
everybody who tried it wanted more. And I got all kinds of feedback. A lady who's or actually a student at SCAD who kind of had HD, one of the HD, can't keep track of all the HDDs, but he said it helped him focus, which was one of the Native American, claims, that it was used for focus and stamina. That could be the way that theobromine, caffeine, and theacrine all stack together to, give you energy and focus. But I started making it, and I realized that it's an important plant. I love the story. The ethnobotany and history just absolutely captivated me. And I realized I had a new mission. So I started, selling it small time, just at farmers markets and things like that. And then I started, growing the business, and realized I think this is what I need to do. And
so, Lou, where were you getting the plants? Were you growing them yourselves, and you took that on in Georgia, or did you purchase it from the coastal region?
No, it was all wild picked. I started picking it myself. We have a small little river house on an island called Heard Island, which is in part of Darien, Georgia. Mm-hmm. And we had the house before, but I didn't realize the island was so full of this plant I had recently discovered. So I had a beautiful maritime forest to start, experimenting with it as much as I wanted. I would pick it all day long, and then I had friends picking, and I hired pickers, and would pick it in the woods on Heard Island, and I would start practicing different process methods and different ways to cure it, dry it, etc., ferment it. Speaking of fermenting, it may have been the very first fermented drink in North America, too. There's some evidence that it was fermented because it does have sugars and yeast in the plant. But that's basically how I started getting my supply. And that is really, you hit the nail on the head, because in order to make this a multi-regional commercial product, there has to be a supply chain. So I started propagating wild Yaupon plants from Heard Island onto our farm in Meadow, Georgia, where we are farming it in a row crop formation, traditional row crop. Mm-hmm. And we're also exploring different models to produce a scalable supply chain in a longleaf tree plantation in Florida. So we have Georgia and Florida, two states where we're really perfecting a scalable supply chain model, which has been the most challenging part of the business.
So you're growing your own at this point, and then it sounds like you kind of perfected your process. Are you actually producing the tea yourself, or have you turned it over to a co-packer?
No, we're producing it ourselves. We sell it in bulk form. A lot of kombucha producers like it because it makes a really, really good kombucha. We sell it to other tea shops who want to sell bulk. For example, Green Sage Cafe in Asheville would buy our bulk product that we process ourselves and send to them, and they serve it over the counter. We also produce our own product for our tea boxes, and we're getting ready to launch again our ready to drink, which is again using our own Yaupon from either the farm or from the Longleaf tree plantation in Florida, which is a fascinating model too, which I can tell you a little bit about at some point.
Well, so when you're saying that it makes is it a base then for a kombucha? Because you were mentioning it fermenting. So does it carbonate itself, or does it, how does that work? I don't know enough about that to really even ask the question properly.
Well, it's a good question. I'm not an expert on it. I can tell you the little I know is that because the Yaupon leaf contains natural sugars and yeast, then when you make kombucha with the SCOBY, it has something to feed on. And traditional black teas don't really have the type of sugar that Yaupon has. So as an augmented tea in a kombucha brew, my understanding is they can use less sugar in making the kombucha because the sugar's in the Yaupon leaf. So it helps in adding the sugar or reducing the need for more sugar. and then it has its own flavor profiles that also enhance the kombucha.
So you mentioned that it has a natural sugar in it. So several years ago at the Flavor of Georgia, I remember tasting your tea and loving it. And so were sugars added to that, or is that the natural sugar I was tasting?
Okay, so you tried our first launch of the ready-to-drink, and we did add a very small amount of organic cane sugar. And the reason, as much as I didn't want to do that, in order to make something shelf stable, you have to add, acidify it.
Right.
When the pH is above a certain level. So typically, you do add sugars to modify that acidified taste that you get in some shelf stable products. Having said that, the new version of the ready to drink that we're working on right now, we're using Yaupon honey as a sweetener instead of cane sugar.
And so is that from bees that are using the Yaupon flower? Is that how that works? Or is it a honey that you guys are producing for yourselves? Just so I'm clear.
Great question. We hope to eventually produce it ourselves on the farm and on the Longleaf tree plantation, because Yaupon is dioecious. It's both the male and the female of both flower. It's a fantastic pollinator, so it's definitely part of the mission as well, is to create this great pollinating environment for bees. Right now, we're buying the Yaupon honey from a producer that has Yaupon on their land. Now, a little tricky because we call it Yaupon/wildflower. When they're producing the Yaupon, when the bees are producing the Yaupon honey, there's a chance that there may be a gallberry flowering somewhere in the vicinity, and a bee may wander over to the gallflower. So we want to be very precise. We know it's mostly Yaupon honey, but there is a chance there may be some gallberry honey in it, so we can't say it's 100% Yaupon, although it's close. So we are buying that. I know that's a long-winded answer to a short question. We are buying our Yaupon honey from a Yaupon honey producer right now.
No, I think we're fascinated by the bees, especially with the knowledge that now that's come forth that bees are so important to the human beings and food, and how important it is for them to stay around for a long time, and us to make sure that we're doing what we can to make sure there are bees. So I love that you have the idea of bringing the bees in to the Yaupon flower and creating that little micro environment there in full circle, and then using the honey also to flavor the teas that you're bottling.
Yeah, and I don't know if we're the first to do this, but having a product with two different delivery systems, being the honey and the Yaupon leaf, I think it's kind of interesting. I don't know if that'll be lost on consumers or not, but we sure love doing it.
I always love hearing stories, too, about when entrepreneurs vertically integrate and they handle their own ingredients, their production, their all the way through to their distributing it to the clients. So I think it's a great model, and I always love hearing when people figure out a way to handle all the different components of it, because it's definitely kind of different businesses. I mean, there are people who are farmers, and there are people who are producers, and there's people who co-package, and you guys are handling so many different facets of your own business that it's really impressive.
Well, thanks. We certainly don't know it all. We need help, but we're plogging through it. We're doing it. That's for sure.
So you mentioned that your wife does this with you as well. Do you guys have a background in being entrepreneurs, or did you grow up in families that had businesses? How did you decide that we want to take on being entrepreneurs?
Well, I think it's there's two kinds of people in the world, aren't there? There are those that are entrepreneurs and those that aren't. I don't mean to be, I'm not trying to be coy, but we definitely are. We have that gene. She has it, and I have it, and I would tilt my hat to her as being a tremendous entrepreneur. Her family is her parents had their own business as well. My parents were not entrepreneurs, but and I started selling things to make extra money at a very young age because we had a large family. So my dad's philosophy was, we have a large family, so budget is limited. We will help our children as far as they want to go in education and sports, in that order. But if you want, a toy to match your neighbor's toy or your friend's toy, you've got to go out and earn it. So we learned at a very early age how to kind of go out and make money.
That's great. I mean, that's kind of a lost thing on this generation more so. And so I love hearing about that. I mean, I know I even had difficulty getting my children to do chores because I was always scheduling them and making sure they had to get everywhere. So it's definitely admirable. I know that I grew up in a family with a similar mentality of limited finances, but also, really encouraging us to work hard. And I, think that's a great attribute.
So I want to back up for a second because I'm curious. You had mentioned the Longleaf tree farm in Florida and explaining that. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mentioned earlier my preoccupation or biggest challenge has been creating a supply chain. It's not hard to go find Yaupon in the woods and pick some, but if you want to have a national product, that's not going to cut it. So we've been designing equipment to help with a wild harvest of Yaupon, and we found a longleaf tree plantation which was basically mismanaged by the previous owner. And when I say that, he didn't apply two of the traditional timber practices. One, herbiciding, and secondly, burning. So what happened is he planted all these longleaf trees, which is the iconic, pine tree of the South. It's an amazing tree in and of itself. And what happened by not herbiciding and not burning, Yaupon has basically crowded out the longleaf pines. So the longleafs are about 5 years old, so they're probably, anywhere from 10 to 15 feet tall. And the 300 acres is absolutely full of Yaupon. So I figured, well, here we go. We're going to manage this longleaf tree plantation a little different way than the traditional model of timber foresters. We're going to manage it for Yaupon as an understory crop. So what we're doing is we're clearing out the Yaupon, which is our harvest. And as the trees grow, it'll also create shade, which the Yaupon likes and increases the size of the leaf and some of the compounds. And what we're doing is we're creating a row crop formation underneath the longleaf pines. And by doing that, we're creating a wonderful wildlife habitat. But more importantly, we're trying to perfect the model of eliminating the environmentally bad stuff that the timber people do, because timber's a great renewable resource. But the herbiciding and the burning is really bad for the environment. So if we can manage to create this model where we're managing the forest, the longleaf plantation for Yaupon, we can eliminate the use of herbicides and the need for burning. And that's just a wonderful thing. If we can accomplish that, and we're on our way to doing it, I think that's just an added benefit. And that just happened by executing, a supply chain. And at the same time, we're designing equipment to actually do a wild harvest in a more efficient way than picking leaves by hand. So it'll be hand picking, but with machinery.
And then so is your plant that you're producing the teas and stuff in and harvesting, are you going to place it down there then in Florida, or is it something you'll pick down there and then process in Georgia?
Well, eventually the plan is to actually build it on site. Right now, a few miles away from the acreage that we have, the longleaf tree farm, we have a warehouse with a processing plant. So we are processing there now. And
just so I'm clear and the audience is clear, do you own that farm now? Is it something you've purchased?
We did. We own it, yes.
Okay, so it was a business decision where if you're going to need this company to grow and potentially take your products nationwide, whether it's just the loose tea or the tea or the raw product all the way to the finished product that's in the bottle, the cold teas, or supplying kombucha companies, you needed to produce more and you needed to do it in a sustainable way. Is that correct?
That's exactly it. And to add to that, the idea is once this model is sort of perfected, then we can do it in multi-states because, you have different weather patterns. You don't want to be susceptible to a Hurricane Michael in one area if you need to harvest. So if we're in Mississippi, if we're in Texas, if we're in Alabama, Florida, Georgia, we'll have multiple processing plants and hopefully Longleaf pine. Longleaf has become a big part of the mission. I don't know how much you guys know about the Longleaf pine, but it's truly, truly an amazing tree that at one time had created the most diverse eco-biosystem in North America in the South, and it's been pretty much decimated for different reasons. King Cotton had come in, and they also sold the wood because it's magnificent wood, but it's truly an amazing tree. And there is a longleaf pine Yaupon alliance in terms of how it grows and how it likes each other. It really creates an amazing environment. So that's becoming more and more a focal point for how we do this down the road. And what's happening now is, in terms of the growth model, we're doing several different grants. We're in the middle of, we're actually towards the end of a grant with Clemson Horticulture, Small Business Innovation Research Grant, studying Yaupon on the farm in a row crop setting under different shade conditions, under different fertilization protocols to see what it does. Because in nature, Yaupon, like every other plant, is going to struggle or compete for nutrients. And one thing about the Yaupon tree or leaf, it does amazing things if you give it more nutrients. So what we're doing is we're trying to see what we can do with it. We can, for example, increase the caffeine content dramatically 7 to 8 times in the field through fertilization. So what we're learning through this grant on the farm has become kind of a research pilot project. We hope to transfer that knowledge to the Longleaf farm, Yaupon and Longleaf farm in Florida and other states as we grow.
I mean, that's amazing.
So
how did you know about the grant, or did you solicit them to try and say, hey, this is something I want to study? And they were like, yeah, we'd love to study it too.
Yeah, we submitted the grant. It took me 3 years to do it, to be awarded. And now we also were awarded a couple different value-added producer grants. And we're also submitting a couple of the really, really interesting grants kind of around the genome sequencing of the Yaupon tree. And that could lead into some real interesting organic natural breeding. So we're really trying to pioneer the research because we think it's valuable. We really, really think it's valuable.
Well, it sounds like there's so much to learn, and there's so many benefits that we do know of, and if there's even more, that's amazing. So with the talk of all these grants and whatnot, one of the conversations we have a lot with entrepreneurs is financing and how they finance their businesses, and if they have to take loans, if they have to bring in partners, investors. And so how have you guys been able to do it?
Well, we're blessed. It's been self-financed to date, plus the grants have been helpful. But it's not an inexpensive enterprise, particularly when you realize not only are you spending money on equipment on the farm level, you're also spending money on equipment for the processing, and we're also spending money on branding and marketing. So it's rather expensive. I do lose a little sleep at night, but if we can get it to a point where enough people recognize the value and we have commercial products and can sell it, we can either take on, hopefully, a strategic partner or finance it through more conventional ways. That story is still to be determined. One thing I didn't mention is we are opening an apothecary in Savannah, right in the historic center of Savannah, which is going to be called the Yaupon Tea House and Apothecary. And what we're doing is we're sending our Yaupon to small artisanal makers of wellness products. And we're asking them to make products for us infused with Yaupon. And the reason we want to do that is, again, part of educating the public about, the magnificent value of this plant, the medicinal value of this plant in different forms. So we see it not just as a tea, but also as an ingredient. And hopefully that will help sort of get us more and more awareness and hopefully sell more products as well. And it's kind of creating an experience around the Yaupon that we hope to recreate. So that's another part of the puzzle when you talk about financing. That's not an inexpensive enterprise either.
Right.
Yeah, we just had that conversation on some of the things to build a store, and it's going to be really, really beautiful and elegant.
So when you talk about this apothecary and the other uses for Yaupon, are they all items that would be edible, or are they also like topical where you would get oils from it and create lotions for anti-inflammation, or what all are the types of products you're thinking?
Well, if you can think of cosmetics for sure, because of the amount of saponins that are great antioxidants for the skin in Yaupon, it lends itself to really good topical creams, hand creams, face creams, cosmetics. Lip balms is antibacterial. So oils, yes, we actually are infusing CBD oil with Yaupon. It seems to like each other quite a bit. We also are going to have salves, and we're trying to recreate some of the traditional uses we know it was used for. The apothecary will also have different functional tea ingredients and herbs and botanicals to compound or mix together with the Yaupon. So it's really, truly meant to focus on wellness products. And at this point, this may change, but right now, everything has to have some degree of Yaupon in it. And what we also want to do is tell the story of the people that are making it for us. And hopefully that'll also, build more awareness. And everyone, without exception, we call them makers. The artisanal makers are just blown away by Yaupon and its ability and to be an ingredient with other wellness products. So
is there such a thing as a Yaupon supplement?
There will be if I have my way.
Excellent. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the products that you guys currently are producing, and tell the audience where they can actually find these things.
Sure. Right now, we have a tea box set, 5 different Yaupon blended teas. It's in a box set. You can buy it on Amazon, and you can buy it in we're in national distribution with KeHE. And so you can buy it in 7 different regions in mostly the small independent health food stores. I would have to say we're in just about every region, but you have to find it in the different sort of independent stores. The ready-to-drink bottled version should be ready to launch sometime mid-spring. We're working real diligently on that right now, and that will be in national distribution. It should be in, hopefully, the Sprouts, the Whole Foods, the Lucky's, all the fresh markets, etc. But that's really slated for spring. And then the apothecary is due to open in mid-March, and that'll primarily be the storefront and an e-commerce platform. So we're still working on that right now.
And so you mentioned being in Sprouts and lots of different stores. Have you guys done that yourselves, or do you have someone who helps get you into these stores? I know other entrepreneurs are always trying to find ways to get their products in.
Yeah, the whole distribution matrix is a whole nother science that I know enough to be dangerous in. But we do have a master broker and a broker network. Some of the big distributors have programs for startups. For example, KeHE and UNFI both have different programs. At KeHE, it's called New at KeHE, and their regional sales forces help you get into stores. And UNFI has a similar program that we hope to be in as well with the ready to drink. And then you have salespeople. We hope to be off and running with a sales manager, national sales manager, by this summer. And we're kind of waiting to the ready to drink to be ready in order to justify hiring a national sales manager. So between the distributor, the broker network, and your sales team, that's to me kind of the way to do it. But you also have brand ambassadors, you have demo people, you have brands like I think there's one on a Boulder, Green Spoon Sales. There's sales group that can also help you. They all have a different cost model, but they all play into the system.
And so some of the lessons that you've learned, I think it's one of the things I want to just point out before I finish asking my question is that how long it took you to get the grant. And I think a lot of people that enter the entrepreneurial world, especially in food, don't understand how long the runway is to develop products, to get them to market, to then make sure grocery stores or markets carry them. And it's a lot of hard work, and obviously the internet and social media helps, but it's still tough, being that people actually have to physically drink or eat your product. So I think that's important. I just want to make that point. So that being said, during this time that you've taken to start this business and grow, what are some of the failures you've had and lessons you've learned from them?
Well, wow, that's a good question. I've made every mistake in the book, so we could have another whole interview on the mistakes. But basically, you don't know everything. I don't have an ego where I think I do know everything. I know when to reach out for help. So, it's been, we're inventing a wheel with Yaupon because no one's done this before. So the mistakes are really learning experiences, both on the harvest side, the processing side, the farming side, the branding. One of the mistakes, I think when we launched our ready to drink the first time, the label didn't really tell people what it was. It was beautiful. The label got everyone's attention, but when they look at it, they would wonder what it was. So the next generation of messaging on the label, I think, is a huge learning experience. You've got to really, and particularly with something that no one really knows. If it was, an everyday product, you don't have to educate people, but we have to tell people what it is. So we've worked really, really hard on making beautiful labels and packaging, but we've worked even harder recently on the proper messaging to tell people what the value proposition is, why they need this drink, and why it's important and part of the story. That's an important lesson. How expensive things are. Freight, for example, is a huge lesson. Freight can really change your bottom line. And also just learning about the different layers in the industry. Part of what, when you asked about marketing and getting into stores, there are a lot of layers, and it's expensive. And I know there's lots of lessons. I could go on and on.
And how about employees? Have you guys? I mean, it sounds like your operation is quite large and multi-levels of it. So it sounds like you both are probably working on this full time at this point, but have you taken on additional staff? I heard you mention possibly bringing a national salesperson. Yeah, we haven't taken the national salesperson on yet. We're looking to do that this summer. We have a harvest crew, which is about 5 to 6. We have an operations manager, which is one person. We have a new utility outfielder. Her name is Risha. She just came to us. She moved back to Savannah from New York, and she's helping with the branding, opening the apothecary. She's helping in so many ways. Her title we don't really know yet, but we're calling her marketing guru. My wife has been a huge help on the branding, the aesthetic, just bringing common sense. She has a very successful
realty company here in Savannah. I'll give her a plug, Judge Realty. So she has great instincts, and she's invaluable. And just having her support goes a long way as well. So she's the vice president. So the administering the grants, my accountant is doing that. Some of the graphic design, we do have an intern, Katie Manning from SCAD, is interning for us right now. We'll probably add another intern. And then the master brokers are really acting as our sales team right now, and I guess that would be considered a subcontracted job. But eventually, we do want our own internal sales people to support the broker network and the distribution network. So we're not really that big, 9 to 10 people, I guess.
It's pretty big. I mean, when you consider, you think of all these startup companies, and it's a lot to bring someone on. Anytime you bring on an employee, you, as an entrepreneur, you know that their livelihood is dependent upon you. So a lot of weight comes with each additional employee you bring on. So 9 people is a lot of people to be responsible for.
Yes, I agree.
And so that all being said, how do you choose employees? How do you make sure they fit your model? Do they sort of come to you because they believe in what you're doing based in the health space, or is it something you actually go out and search for and hire and interview?
Well, a little bit of both. If you ask my wife, she will say, I'm trying to remember her term, she materialized Risha. She said, we need help, we need somebody, and Risha appeared, and she's just awesome. So there's a combination of, searching for a person with the right experience to fit the job, but also there's a certain sensibility with what we're doing. We're really doing some, I don't know the right term, but it's just real. It's as real as dirt, what we're trying to do. And certain people, that's a Southern expression, by the way. It's as real as dirt.
I like it. And it's very fitting considering your role. So,
a big part of it is the right person. It has to be the right fit. But we do need expertise. We need competency. We need, people who fit our value system, but also that have the experience and tools that we need. So it's a great question. And I guess it extends into different facets when you look at what you're looking for.
And a question I like to ask everyone that's been in the flavor of Georgia, how was that contest for you? I know Deborah and I were there, and we've been judging for a couple years now, but how was that overall, and how have you been supported by the state of Georgia, do you feel, for your business?
It was a great experience. I think we were a little early. I don't think we had our game together well enough for it. So hopefully next year we'll be back at the Flavor of Georgia with some really, really cool products. So I thought it was a great experience, good learning experience, and great support. We got good awareness. We made good contacts. It was really well run. Met some really good people, have become friends through it. So I have nothing but great things to say about Flavor of Georgia. And hope to do it again soon. I thought about, they just had a new registration for it, and I just didn't think I was quite ready with the Ready to Drink, which is kind of our flagship line. So I didn't sign up for this year, but I will next year. But great experience, and Georgia supports us a lot. I find great support from Georgia.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I just want to point out there to the audience as we're talking is that, even though there's a deadline and it just came up, I don't think forcing a product through or a group of products through is the way to push your product into a market. I think taking your time, I know everyone's in a rush and they want to try to get their product out there and they think it'll be too late if they don't do it now, but taking the time to really put the product out there that you want and is of the quality and flavor and texture or taste, whatever it ends up being that you want is really important. So I want to point that out to the audience for sure, because when we go prematurely to a market, we often fail because we didn't do it the right way, and we have lack of confidence in it. So if we have lacking confidence in it, I'd say it shows when we go to speak about the flavor of Georgia, or speak at events like the flavor of Georgia. Because at the flavor of Georgia, and the audience who doesn't know, you actually have to present on your product, and you get 3 minutes to do it. So you basically give a 3-minute spiel, and you can always tell the people that have submitted the product and made it that might not be quite sure it's ready to be on the market yet, and the ones who are confident in their product.
We've actually heard from quite a few of the people who've been on the show that while they were completely ready for the show, what they weren't ready for was the attention they got following the show. They didn't have staff to help them follow up with all their leads, all their interests. They had lots of different groups they had met with who maybe wanted to work together, and they just didn't know, they weren't prepared to digest all that came their way, all the attention. And so, but it's a great opportunity for people, and I love that you guys were there, and I was super excited to try your product. I fell in love with it, and I can't wait to try it again next time. So it sounds like maybe 2020.
Yeah, hopefully 19. Oh, well, for flavor of Georgia, correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and
or you can try it. You can try it sooner. We'll be in the market before then.
Okay, we'll definitely look for it. One of the things I also it made me think that I know Kent Wolf and the group at the University of Georgia who do the flavor of Georgia as part of the Center of Agribusiness and Economic Development. It brings up a point. What I haven't seen is a health food or a health drink category. And I know they do a lot of the other categories in there, but I wonder if it's something I'll probably suggest it to them for 2020, because I think there are a lot of healthy products that are coming out of Georgia, and beyond just the categories. Honey obviously is a healthy product and it needs its own category, but there's ways I see Georgia people combining products to make them healthy, like you were mentioning the honey and the tea and things like that have extra health benefits. So it's something I'm definitely going to suggest, and obviously maybe they'll hear this podcast and I won't have to suggest it, so that would be good. But that being said, how do you get your product out there to market? Are you sampling at markets and events, or is it something because of the nature and the health benefits to your product, it's sort of taking a life of its own? And we did talk a little bit about brokers and sales and distributions, but how did you get from there to here where you are now? Was it a lot of your own legwork and going out there?
Definitely. You've got to be out there doing farmers markets and charity events. And when you are in a store like Whole Foods, when we first launched our ready to drink, we were in Whole Foods in the South. And we did a lot of demos. And it works. It really, really works, bringing awareness to the customers on site, on the floor. And that's critical to support the product in the stores. It's also a big expense, but it's critical. And as you grow, you have to figure out that balance of supporting your product in the market. If you get the traction and start getting the velocity in the stores, that kind of takes a life on of its own, but you have to spur it. You have to initiate it. You need those first early adopters to talk about your product. And then, different press that you'll get as a result helps. So it's kind of a snowballing effect, as I see it, to get the traction and get the awareness and get people to buy it.
And Lou, as your company's getting bigger and your sales are now nationwide, it sounds like, how do you manage all of your accounts?
Well, that's basically done through the distribution network. KeHE, for example, for the boxed teas, you do have to manage their paperwork, but they're going to send you the invoices and the write-offs and the different aspects of their accounting. You have to keep an eye on it because you want to make sure you get paid what you do. But there are also lots of different chargebacks that you need to understand. But that accounting from them is really pretty good. It helps, and they also have resources, portals that you can go on and see what stores are selling, which products are selling. So you can be really, really proactive and find out, what's happening store by store through their portals and their information database.
And through them, will they do sampling for you if you wanted to really push a product at a certain time of year? Or, will they create an opening for you so you can fly wherever and, do an event yourself at a store? How does that work?
Absolutely. They love nothing more than having demos. They love it. And that industry is changing a little bit. You're seeing more and more companies popping up that perform that service for you. And depending on the store, some stores have an internal team that will demo your product if you train them. And some stores prefer that you come yourself or you hire someone to do it for you. But if you have the desire to do that, it's wide open. They think that's the most useful thing for a startup brand to help launch a product. That goes without. That's a huge tool.
And so the idea of having a national salesperson someday, is that so that overall it financially is more beneficial to the company to do it that way?
Well, that's partly it, but it's also you need to have someone 100% in your corner. Brokers are great, but they also have a myriad of other products they're representing. So you really need someone fighting for your shelf space, getting you into the meetings and the different category reviews that are going on. You need someone fighting for you and representing your product 100% of the time. So I think overall that becomes, a value proposition to have someone, working for you. And that national salesperson should, over time, with need, build a regional sales force. And these people are the ones who are, know the store owners, know the people, and they really, really help place your product and also find out, you get feedback as to what you may need to do. You may need, rack cards information on the bottles. You may need a sale at certain times of the year. So, that whole system really kind of functions as a juggernaut for your product. But that sales manager should, be the spearhead for that.
That's amazing. And so as we start to wrap up, I wanted to ask a couple more questions. The first one is how has getting into your own business affected your relationship with your wife? And is it something that's brought you guys closer? Is it something that you both are passionate about, being both entrepreneurs? And how does she help you on a regular basis?
What's today? She's been, well, just having her support is great. Now, she does have her own, realty company, so she's quite busy with that. And like I said, very successful, and she's getting into more and more commercial development. So she does have her plate full, but she devotes a certain amount of time to helping with the store and with the product line, and she has an absolute great aesthetic. She's very much into the local art scene, promoter of the arts and buyer of art. So that brings in a whole nother dimension that helps kind of build the brand's aesthetic and feel. So she's invaluable for that. It's only helped the relationship. She believes in it. It's expensive. It takes a long time. We're in it for the duration. So it just has added a dimension. We also have a 13-year-old, and he's at the age where he's running all over the place. So we have to divide our time and be real efficient. So we find, a family meal every night, really kind of when we all get back together and talk and have a nice family meal and discuss what we're all doing and catch up. In the meantime, we're running, pretty fast in different directions, but also working towards the same goal. So it's really helped our relationship. You might have to ask her to verify that, but I think it's really helped our relationship. And I'm really tickled pink. She really came on to help more forcefully in the last 6 months. And it's been great. I mean, she just has great instincts, and I rely on her a lot. I prefer to be in the field working on the supply chain and on the farm. And she has a different sensibility, and she's very precise and thinks things through. I'm more of seat of the pants. My philosophy is move your ass, your brain will follow.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
I like that too. Is that Southern also?
No, I can't remember where I got that one. I think I got that in Jamaica somewhere.
Yeah, I have to tell myself that every time I try to work out. Just don't worry, don't think too much. Just get your ass in there.
Yeah. So it's helped. Plus, our 13-year-old is getting a good glimpse of two entrepreneurs, doing our thing. And, as he's getting older, he'll be on a tractor soon. And he was my first picker to help me. So he's, learning something, I hope. So I think it's a great question. I think it's just added to our overall, lifestyle in a positive way.
Yeah, I think it's an experience that kids don't get anymore. Deborah and I both grew up in entrepreneurial families where both parents were entrepreneurs, and on note of the tractor, I think that's huge. For me, was a huge lesson. I think my parents put me on a tractor mowing the lawn at about age 2. I couldn't even reach the pedals. I just knew how to turn off the key so I could get off the thing. But
right.
Yeah, on a farm, they put you to work no matter what, free labor. But that being said, I really cannot tell you how much props I give for doing that, and just even recognizing your son and giving him the opportunity to learn, because I do think a lot of entrepreneurial attitudes and personalities and experience and opportunity comes from growing up in the business and learning and seeing it your whole life. I mean, I know how much I learned just by watching and being a part of it, and my parents allowing me to be a part of it. And I think for Deborah, it's the same too. So before I ask the next question, I wanted to give you props for that, and I love hearing that for sure, because I'm really hoping there'll be another generation of entrepreneurs coming through, particularly in our culture in the United States, since we kind of do this instant gratification thing, and kids don't seem to get the long-term hard work and grit it takes to actually do a business or be an entrepreneur or develop the thick skin necessary to keep moving forward when times are bad. And so I'm glad to hear that. My last question is, if you could go back to the beginning and tell yourself something or a few somethings that you know now, what would they be?
Trust your instincts. Work harder, and don't let the little challenges get you down. Work right through them harder. Just keep plugging away if you believe in it, and I do.
Sounds like great advice.
And so, Lou, I want to thank you for coming on the show again and being so honest and telling us all about your story and your family and your lessons. And what you've learned from those lessons. And that being said, as you open up the store, we'd love to get you back on the show again and before the end of the year, just to see how things have progressed with the store. And one of the things we really want to do on this podcast is tell people stories, not only once, but sort of experience the growth and the hardships of their companies and their endeavors with them, so the audience can actually see and feel and hear the emotion of as we move forward. And I think it also gives everyone on the podcast an opportunity to hear themselves, and which is growth, and if you're willing to learn from it. So having that opportunity and being able to get back on the show and perform or tell your story differently and tell your experiences differently from what you learned is important. So we're going to make sure we do that on the show so people can see how people grow and how people learn and how businesses grow, because it's not just a snapshot in time here. I want to make sure that we're actually doing a living experience of all the entrepreneurs. And with what you're doing and how you're growing, I'd love to have you back on the show.
That'd be great. Can I leave you with a little Yaupon vignette story?
Absolutely.
So there's a health food store in Savannah called Brighter Day. It's fantastic. And the owner, Peter and Jane Broadhead, are great. And Peter is a self-taught herbalist, and he really, really is a force in the industry. And he has his own line of herbal remedies, one we like, Pizza Immune. Whenever we're feeling a little off, we'll buy his little Pizza Immune tincture and put it on our tongue. Well, when I first bottled Yaupon tea, which was the very first of any kind, I brought it to him and asked if he'd carry it. And he said, wow, the American mate, we wanted to do this back in the 70s. He said, finally, someone's doing this. This is really important, and I will carry it. So the first store we were in was Brighter Day. And for us, in the early stages of discovering Yaupon, that was a huge validation. Stores like Whole Foods, for example, will look at how he curates his store for trends and to see what to put on their shelves. So it was really immensely important to us. So my wife and I invited Peter and Jane out for dinner just to thank him for putting us on the shelf. So we went out to a nice dinner, and we had some wine. And Peter said, an interesting thing happened the day I put you on the shelf. I said, what's that? He said, well, I went home to tend to my medicinal herbal plant circle. Apparently, because he does his own herbal remedies, he has an herbal garden that's in a circle with all these medicinal plants, whether it's echinacea, arrowroot, I don't know all the plants in the circle. He said, what an interesting thing happened. He said, I went home to tend to my herbal garden, and right in the middle of the circle, a Yaupon sprouted. And I said, really? That's interesting. And I said, Peter, what do you mean in the middle? And he looked at me and just nodded, and he said, the exact center. He said, this plant's announcing itself. Its time has come. It needs to be in the market.
Oh, that's amazing.
I love that. It's so interesting. Lots of entrepreneurs talk about validation that comes early on in their businesses that lets them know, like, it's a sign, like, I got to keep going with this. It's not just me. It's not just a feeling, like, and I love that was yours.
Yep.
And as we get off, I also wanted, if you would email us the name of that shop and the owners, I do want to put them in the episode notes so we give them a shout out, and anyone else that you've mentioned on there, or your wife's realty company, since we mentioned online, if you want to send us that information in an email, I would love to post it in the episode notes under the special mentions category so the audience can click on it and see it if they'd like, as well as the location of your new store and the name of your new store, so we can have that as well. And
you bet.
Yeah. And then lastly, how do people get a hold of you? What's your website and what's your social media tag so people can follow you?
Okay, the website is yaupontea.com, and the Instagram is Yaupon Tea Company. The Facebook, and we're trying to get all this coordinated better, but I think the Facebook is Aussie Yaupon Tea. And Aussie, by the way, means the purifier, which is what Yaupon was called by many tribes, but that's the Creek word for what they called Yaupon.
Excellent. And thank you again, Lou. I can't tell you how much we appreciate it. And I'm Justin Bizzarro. You can reach me at justin.bizzarro@gmail.com. That's Bizzarro. If anyone's interested in being on the show or has any questions or wants to do an interview and tell their stories, that's how you get a hold of me. We are on Instagram at Justin and the Food Entrepreneurs. Thank you again, Lou, and everyone have a great week. Thank you, and thank you to the audience for listening.